Hello, in this video we are going to look at factorizing expressions with two negative terms. Okay, I would recommend you go back and watch part 1 and part 2 of factorizing in order to better understand this one. Let's check it out. So it says factorize negative 6x times negative 6x take 20x squared. The goal with factorizing, okay, is to put it into a pair of brackets or two pairs of brackets. So what your goal is to pull a highest common factor out the front of a pair of brackets when there's two terms, okay? We have to first identify this highest common factor. Now looking here, I'm going to first look at these normal numbers. What would be a common factor between 6 and 20? I think that the easiest way to look at it is that 6 and 20 are even numbers. So 2 is a factor, right? And I can see that they're both negative. So I can actually just pull that negative out the front. That's the trick with these. If both are negatives, then make your life a bit simpler by pulling that negative out the front as well. Okay, then you're looking at, okay, is there a common factor between my variables, x and x squared? Yes, there is. X. You choose the variable with the lowest power, right? So x is what you're going to pull out the front. And then you're putting it, your goal is to get that in a pair of brackets, okay? Then you're asking yourself, well, negative 2x times what will give me negative 6x? Well, to end up with a negative number, you're going to have to do a negative times a positive, right? So that's going to be 3. And then you can always check it. Have a few goes and check it. So negative 2x times 3, negative 2 times 3, negative 6, x times 1, x. So you want to end up with that first number. We will get some practice at it, so no fear. All right. Then let's have a look. I asked myself, negative 2x times what would give me negative 20x squared? So first look at the coefficients, I guess, the numbers out the front, the normal numbers. Negative 2 times what would give me negative 20? Negative 2 times 10 would give me negative 20. Because a negative times a positive gives a negative. So you really want to understand your negatives and positives before you get into this. Okay, so negative 2x times 10, and I need to get that x squared in there. So x times what gives me x squared? X times x. And then we can just do the checking step, right? When you're expanding just a term with one pair of brackets and a number out the front, you use this crab claw technique. I think I have a video on that somewhere. So negative 2x times 3 is negative 6x. Negative 2 times positive 10 is negative 20. X times x, x squared. So you want to be able to end up with what you started with when you factorize. You're checking that factorizing. Anyway, lots of talking. Let's try out this one. Negative 8x squared take 12x. Factorizing. Now, so 8 and 12, they're both even numbers. So I initially think, okay, 2 is the highest common factor, but it's not quite the highest one. So have a think. I'm going to double that 2. All right. And 4. So check 4 goes into 8. 4 also goes into 12. That works for me. Let's try it. So I'm going to put my highest common factor at the front. And I know that they're both negative numbers. So I'm going to put negative 4 out the front. And then I look at my variables, x squared and x. Well, I choose that variable with the lowest power. And that's my highest common factor I put out the front. And then I ask myself, negative 4x times what would give me negative 8x squared? Negative 4 times 2 would give me negative 8. X times x would give me x squared. Great. Okay. Now let's focus on our next number. And we've got to put a sign in between them. We'll put a plus there for now. negative 4x times what number will give me negative 12x? Well, negative 4 times 3 would give me negative 12x, would give me negative 12. X times 1 will give me x, so there's no need to put anything there. And then we can do our checking step. So that one where you expand the brackets is just your check step. So use crab claw to check. Negative times a positive is a negative, so negative 8. X times x, x squared. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. X times 1 is x. And you end up with what you started with. Negative 8x squared, take 12x. Looks good. Now let's just try one more. Factorizing this one. Okay. Now, a good first step, actually, they're both even. You would think that 2 is initially the factor, the highest common factor, but sometimes one of the numbers is actually a factor of the other number. See how 4 goes into 8? So here, what do you think that the highest common factor is? It's going to be negative 4. Okay, so negative 4. So when they're both negative, you pull that negative out the front, is what I'm saying. So negative 4 times what will give me negative 4r squared? Negative 4 times 1. Oh, actually, silly me. You got to, so when you're checking your highest common factors, you also want to check both the numbers and your variables, remember? So what's the highest common factor of the variables? Well, it's going to be r, the one with the lowest power. So negative 4r times what will give me negative 4r squared? Well, I'm pretty sure it's just 1r. Negative 4 times 1 gives me negative 4. R times r gives me r squared. Then let's add in our other one. Negative 4r times what gives me negative 8r? Well, negative 4 times 2 gives me 8. R times 1 gives me r. And then you do your check step. So, crab claw when there's one pair of brackets. Negative 4r times 1r, well, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. R times r, r squared. And then we've got other crab claw. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. R times 1 is r. So we ended up with what we started with. Okay. This is expanded form. This is factored form. Factorized form is when you want to put it into a pair of brackets or 2 pairs of brackets. But I will see you in the next video, which we're going to look at. It looks a little bit complicated, but it's not, okay? I will see you then to factorize with this method. I'll see you there.